So how many of you I've already know Corey? I'm just curious, like just on the chat.
I don't even know myself, if I'm being perfectly honest with you.
Yeah, but so Corey is, and Corey chime in. I don't know if I could do justice. You're the chief cloud economist. You can explain the term as well at Duckbill Group. I personally know him by following his newsletter last week in AWS. He is very popular on Twitter, and I was always a fan of him. The way he explains things like AWS, new AWS services, and cloud infrastructure in general, I've always find it interesting. When we were putting agenda for this event, he was one of the first people that came to my mind. And we thought, hey, governance as code is a new topic. And maybe we can, use Corey to help explain the topic to the broader audience and why organizations are adopting it. Hey, Corey, thanks for joining us.
No, thank you for having me. As you mentioned, I started off as a cloud economist, two words no one can define. You have cloud, meaning a bunch of other people's computers, and economist is someone who claims to know everything about money, but dresses like a flood victim. So far, it seems to be working to my benefit, and I don't get called on it very often. What we do is we fundamentally fix companies' AWS bills, which is a problem that hits everyone in the fullness of time because it never goes away on its own. It is an aspect of governance, but I don't call it governance just because that tends to speak to a whole bunch of things that I don't have the patience or temperament for, which is sort of the reason I'm here today. We're talking, instead of having to make this a people problem, there are aspects that can become a code problem. And I think that's what we're going to explore, unless I misread the show notes early on, which is entirely possible.
Okay, we'll risk it. No worries. So just taking a step back, right? Everyone is moving to the cloud at warp speed, but it's becoming a challenge. A lot of people that I talk to, it's not about moving to the cloud or moving what to the cloud anymore. It's about enhancing and increasing your operations within the cloud at scale. You have a lot more apps, a lot more developers pushing to clouds, multiple clouds. In your experience, Corey, what are the biggest challenges about going towards the cloud at a higher speed than before?
Prioritization, for the most part, is probably the easy answer to it. There's also there's a lack of governance and lack of control, because it seems ridiculous when you're doing a small scale experiment, which is how the cloud always seems to creep its way into places. I'm spending $50 a month. Why do I need to allocate what project this is for? Why do I need to make sure that there are things that automatically turn things off? And then you realize, I could take my cloud bill and either pay for cloud computing services for a month, or I could buy Guam. And at some point along that journey, you start losing sight of some of the more interesting and challenging aspects of it. Is it about trying to understand, is the bills too high? Often, no, not at large company scale, because people are always more expensive than computers. Instead, it's, okay, our bill is higher this month than it was last month. Why? What does that mean for our projections? But companies being companies, very often you're empowered to spin up $1 million cluster, but you're not empowered to look at the bill, because that could be dangerous. And it plays this game of corporate telephone, where by the time it gets to you, all you hear is, you're spending too much money. The same questions arise if you'd be spending less, because being accurate in predictions matters to people whose entire job is, predicting things.
Absolutely. And same holds true for things like security and compliance along with cost, right? And these are all the things that could go wrong in the cloud, right? And I've talked to a lot of these people.
I'm going to stop you right there. That is not all the things that can go wrong in the cloud. If you ever come with a list of this is everything that could possibly go wrong, we're in the middle of a wide-scale internet DNS outage as we are giving this presentation. So there's always something else that can break, and it's always DNS, but that's not the point. That's not the point. Please continue as I continue to yell jokes over you.
Absolutely. No, but what I was going to say is different groups. Security, there are things that go wrong in terms of security, in terms of management, in terms of hygiene, like tags. Everyone keeps talking about. I don't know why tags are so important. Probably you can tell me a bit more on that. And of course, cost. That's something very dear to you as well that you talked about. At the end of the day, people see this cloud bill that they were not expecting to see. They were, I think someone in the chat mentioned, Yodi, if I'm pronouncing your name okay, he's like, is it not cheaper to move to the cloud? The FinOps or the cloud economist, like Corey, find out in the end, like how expensive could it be? And all of a sudden, you have all these fleet of policies that need to be implemented and done at scale. What's the worst thing you've seen people do in the cloud, Corey?
I use Route 53 as a database, which is pretty darn close, but it's usually about misunderstanding how things tend to work in many cases. The people believe that, oh, my cloud bill is going to be a function of how many customers I have. It's not. It's a function of how many engineers you've hired, because it turns out that everyone is really quick to spin things up, but turning things off is never as big of a deal as people think it is. Auto scaling is a great myth because people talk about it in the sense of being able to scale up quickly, because if you don't, you're dropping customers on the ground. But scaling back down, well, that's only money. And if you turn the wrong thing off, that could cause a site outage. And do you really need to save money that much? Very few of us have jobs where the number one job is to save money at all costs. It's usually a trailing function, and that means it tends to get dropped when people are told to pick their top 5 priorities. Somehow that never makes the list.
No, for sure. And if you move on from a developer standpoint, you have all these fleet of policies that needs to be implemented through scripts and tools and ticketing systems, and developers are getting frustrated. They don't really care. They just want to push their application in the cloud and make the magic happen for the business, right? So it's really like balancing both things, right? You have to implement these policies, and then you have to keep your developers happy too, because at the end of the day, they are the ones who build revenue-generating apps, right, Corey?
Well, in theory, not all of them generate revenue. Have you heard of venture capital? The other side of it, too, is that when I was an engineer, I always had a visceral distaste for anything on the governance side, because it was an unfortunate reminder that on some level, VC bubble notwithstanding, I have to generate more value than I cost. And it turns out that all the snacks and whatnot in the office that every company was giving out at that point it wasn't about the fact that something I just naturally deserve, is because they were hoping to make me happy and I'd be more productive. Well, reminding me that I need to make money at these things is, oh, that's a problem. I just sort of assumed it was my due somehow. It's a weird psychological effect, but people don't like being reminded of the fact that they have that spending company money unwisely has consequences and repercussions.
Yeah,
except for WeWork.
No, absolutely. And what if the solution for this could be as simple as, just like for infrastructure, everyone uses code to manage their infrastructure. Why can they use to automate governance, right? What do you think about the idea?
I think it's a necessary first step, because every time, without exception, that I have seen companies freak out about the cloud bill, which is always where it starts with me, it's, we're going to have a person act as the gateway for this. Their job then becomes, I'm going to sit here and tell people to turn things off, or in some cases, act as an approval gate where you have to talk to me in order to spin up a new cluster. I have never once seen that person not leave the company within 8 months, because it sucks. You become the department of no, you have no friends as a result, and you start to basically despise work. Why is that something that humans have to do? That is the perfect job for computers to do, because everyone hates computers already. They don't care. They're still terrible.
Yeah, you don't have to hate it. And I think someone asked a question, no tags. Is it the same thing as labels? I believe so, correct? You're the cloud expert.
I've not seen the word labels in the AWS ecosystem, but that's okay. It sounds like it might be an Azure thing, because they always have their own vocabulary around different things. But labels aren't a term of art that I have encountered in my travels, which tells me either I'm missing an entire wing of AWS, which is entirely possible, it's a giant thing, or it's coming from a different area. But the functional definition of tags is pieces of metadata that tell you things about it, like who spun it up, what cost center it's in, what is it, production or not, what's the classification of data in, is it something that has PII or not, and so on and so forth, where you can start making assessments and slicing and dicing what happens. And the reason this matters is because, ignoring the security piece, although that's there too, on the bill, you see what shows up and it's, okay, we spent this much money on storage and this much money on databases, but the company doesn't care about that. They want to know how much was production, how much was research and development, because there are tax consequences to those decisions. They want to know what is their cost per MAU, or the model of unit economics. And tagging is, so far, the only way we really have visibility into slicing and dicing the bill along those axes.
Yeah, it's surprising how something as simple as tagging can help with so many problems.
Yes, tagging, it starts off simple. It never ends that way. For some tagging project I was on, I'm not kidding, they turned the tagging metadata attachment into an entire state machine. It's not quite DNS as a database level, but it's close.
Okay. So now introducing cloud governance as code. For those of you who are familiar with it and those of you who are not, cloud governance is the same concept. Just like you automate infrastructure provisioning with code, you automate governance, be it cost policies, operational policies, security, compliance, everything, right? Just like Corey said, you get a reason to blame the computers themselves, not humans, for slowing you down, right? And the concept is that you have this declarative language that you can write your policies in, that your developers can actually understand, and they are part of your development life cycles. They get deployed with code behind the scenes, and they are automatically triggered, and they enforce through automated remediation. They make sure that your developers are staying on track, or their infrastructure is staying on track. But again, the key thing is the automated remediation part as well. How would you explain it, Corey?
I'd say that it's the equivalent of having a person sitting over your shoulder whenever you wind up committing something and saying your code is bad in this way, and this way. No one wants to work with that person, but having something programmatically do that for you in the form of a linter, for those who are good at things. I'm not. I wait till I check something in, it breaks a Lambda function, I have to rebuild the whole thing because I'm terrible at computers. But the idea of having that tested automatically means it runs on everything in your environment, not just the things someone's paying attention to. It happens every time. It doesn't go on vacation, and it becomes something that is, I guess, becomes provable. It's also terrific from the audit perspective when you start looking into the higher level governance order of, okay, great. So every resource you deploy has a tag. How do you prove that that's the case when your auditor asks? Well, here's the system that automatically does that, which gives it the right classification. If the developer hasn't assigned that, it's blocked from going to production until they do. That is something that auditors understand, rather than, have you met Steve? I know Steve's around here somewhere. Steve's on vacation that day, and so is your audit.
Absolutely. And moving on to the next one. Introducing Cloud Custodian as well. You'll probably hear a lot more from Liz and Liam later on about what Cloud Custodian is. Just curious, who's online right now is an actual Cloud Custodian user? They can all raise their hands. They're on screen right now. Thanks, Corey. And or your users, put them in the chat window. So Cloud Custodian were created by one of the co-founders of Stacklet, Kapil, who's also on in a later panel. It's a rule engine that it's open source in nature. You can use simple declarative language or YAML to create these policies with different actions, with different filters, and that engine basically automatically deploys it. Automatically actions are triggered, and the project itself has been rapidly growing. We have a community of over, I think, 1,500 folks on the chat channel. And we have contributors outside of Stacklet across every cloud. A lot of pretty much everyone in banking, everyone in finance, everyone is contributing and using the product in some form or fashion. What are your thoughts about Custodian, Corey? You've been one of the early users, I believe, right? Or am I wrong?
I am. First off, I need something that solves that particular problem. There's no way around that. But most of the open source projects around this arena on GitHub are, how do I put it, adorably naive. Because they say, oh, we built this thing and it works super well, the 10 instances in our test account. Great. Good for you. Now, what if I have 10,000 instances in a single region, in a single account? And the response generally from the audience is, you can do that? Yes. At that point, you're hitting rate limits on everything. You have to build a queue, work through it, be responsible, not exhaust rate limits, which are account wide. If you exhaust the EC2 describe instances API call in AWS, for example, other things use that, like auto scaling groups, and suddenly auto scaling doesn't. It becomes a problem, and running even in development in those accounts, it does impact production, which is a real fun issue to track down. The problem is that they don't have a mature approach to things. Cloud Custodian came out of Capital One, where if nothing else you can say about Capital One, they definitely have a sense of rigor, because they're not Netflix, not to disparage Netflix in any way. But if Netflix breaks, you have to restart your stream, or God forbid, go outside for a minute. If Capital One breaks things, suddenly the ATM network is spitting out the wrong balance, and suddenly we have questions about the stability of society. The risk factor is different. I'm not saying one is worse than the other, mind you. I hate going outside too. I hear you, but it's just a different arena. And it takes a very different approach to these things in the sense of how you can view these things. Now, it is an open source project. On some level, it does have a little bit of a learning curve tied to it. You have to wind up going in some extensive explorations in some kind. And let's be honest, there's a certain, how to put this, lack of managerware tied to it. Whereas, oh, here's the YAML file that winds up explaining what the rule sets are configured. When you explain that to someone whose primary means of interacting is via PowerPoint or via Excel, that doesn't breed a lot of confidence. It lacks the managerware piece of it.
Yeah.
And for compliance, especially when showing it to auditors, that becomes a concern as well. So I'm not here to disparage the open source project. I'm a huge fan, but there are ways in this arena where it doesn't go far enough. And I was lamenting that for years until I heard that Stacklet was being created specifically around this problem. Then, oh, good. I'm looking forward to seeing what comes out of them.
No, absolutely. I think later on in the session, we'll definitely have Liam and Liz show you a demo of Stacklet platform, how it helps you accelerate the adoption of Cloud Custodian within your organization and provides a UI and other core management capabilities on top of an already pretty powerful open source product. If you are new to Cloud Custodian, you can go to the cloudcustodian.io site and start playing with it. If you would like to see how Stacklet has built different solutions on it, you can go to stacklet.io. There will be a get demo button at the top right. You can click that and we'll schedule a live demo for you. But if you hang around for another hour or so with other presenters are done, we'll actually show you the products in action as well. So I'm super excited about that.